Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and I have got Telegram Sam back in the guest spot. Hello Sam, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me back.
Not a problem, not a problem, and good to have you back. Today's assignment's a bit of a tough one. So we are going to be looking at five punk singles from the years 1976 to 1980 inclusive. I'm not going to say top five because, as I was just saying to Sam earlier, I've got 5,000, punk singles to select. There's just so many. So it's just basically five favorite punk singles that we just want to talk about. And without further ado, Sam, take it away. Say with your number five.
All right. This is the only one that I physically have, but this is Pay to Come by Bad Brains. Originally came out in 1980 on this single. But it's just like when I think of the early beginnings of hardcore music, they're just like such a big influence on that whole East Coast, Washington, D.C., New York scene. Like we probably would have never had bands like Minor Threat and like Black Flag if it wasn't for them. And yeah, that song is just so hard rock and just it's full of just so much energy. And I just love it. It's what got me to love and want to really get into hardcore punk a little bit more. And it's a lot of people actually discovered it on the first Alternative Tentacles comp called Let Them Eat Jelly Beans that came out the following year. And that's how it kind of blew up. And they ended up getting the deal to release their self-titled debut album in 1982. And they ended up doing a live records session. And that's the one that's featured on their debut album. So the one on this is slightly different, but really not that much different.
That's a killer. How influential were they or are,
Yeah.
it can't be denied. Political, their music is just full on aggression. It's socially conscious. It's just so influential and it's tapped into modern hardcore. And without Bad Brains, there'd be so many bands today that wouldn't have been around.
Totally agree. And they're just interesting mix of also like adding reggae to albums, like these two, you would think opposite sides of the music spectrum, and then like putting those two things together, just like it works in a weird way.
Absolutely. I put them in the classification of Godfather. So they really are the godfathers of hardcore. But no, that's a great first choice.
Thank
I've
you.
actually gone for my number five down the sort of the American path, and Mr. Jim Carroll, People Who Died. So so Jim Carroll, you may know him through the Basketball Diaries, beat poet, punk singer, punk band. Now, how I got into Jim Carroll's a little bit strange. There was this really bad teenage film called Tough Turf in 1985 that starred James Spader, Robert Downey Jr., and Kim Richards. And it was sort of like a Roger Corman version of West Side Story, really cheesy 1980s. And, you have the preppy guy played obviously by James Spader. Kim Richards is the girl that's the wrong side of the tracks. And it's sort of like, it's a whole West Side Story set in a high school. And there's a school dance. And the band that's playing at the school dance, well, not the school dance, but the dance they're going to is Jim Carroll. Go figure that out. And the song that was played was People Who Died and It's Too Late. And I've sort of been semi-obsessed by the movie because it's bad and also Jim Carroll ever since. The song, I like it a lot. It's been covered by various bands. I think even Guns N' Roses or Duff definitely has covered it through maybe his solo work. But he only, I think he left the building about 10 years ago, died quite young with a heart attack. He's gone through a lot. The song itself is just basically talking in a gallows humor about all the people that he knew on the streets who are no longer with us and how they died through various things. It's got that very dark humor, but yeah, that's my number five, and that's one of my favorite songs.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of him before, or that movie you're talking about. Now I'm gonna
Tough
have to check
Turf, and it's spelled
both of those out.
Tuff. And the
Okay.
soundtrack for Tough Turf is just such a mixed bag. It's got Marianne Faithfull, it's got Jim Mack and the Heart Attack, which are kind of middle of the road, sort of Stax horns type band, and then you've got Jim Carroll. It's just weird, but yeah, worth, if you like a really bad movie night and a little bit of a cheese fest, check it out. A very young James Spader and a very young Robert Downey Jr.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check both of those out.
Yeah.
My number two is kind of an obvious classic, but London Calling by The Clash originally came out in 1979 from their album London Calling. And I don't know, just something about that song. It was just so, because like it was towards the end of the whole British punk era, like Sid Vicious had died, the Sex Pistols were done. So everyone was kind of moving on from it. And The Clash were putting out the seminal album, and that seminal Calling track, kind of talking about like the end times. The 3 Mile Island incident had just happened, and that's like referred to in the song, and also like the personal things they're going through with their record company. The company didn't want to put out a double album, a double punk album, and the song was like 3.5 minutes long, which is crazy long for a punk song. So they didn't even want to originally put out the London Calling single, and just the whole sort of end times they were feeling during that time, and how the ending is the Morse code for SOS is just so perfect. And yeah, it's just can't get any better than that, really, for a Clash song.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Phony Beatlemania.
Yeah.
No, is some really great lyrics in that, and that was their cut through commercial moment in Australia, at least. I think the diehard fans were fully on board with the Clash, their self-titled debut, which is a killer. Give 'em Rope, and yeah, I think that was the big breakthrough commercial album. And you know, interesting you were saying about the double album. What did they do the next one? They did a triple album. So
They really stuck it to them that time.
they did. And one band, they probably were at the peak of their powers. They went number one. They had a number one album and sort of fizzled out. So, you know, just one of those things. But yeah, that's a really good choice. Well done. My number four is off the Stranglers' number 4 album, and it's Get a Grip on Yourself. Now, I really love the Stranglers, and they don't sort of fit the archetypical sort of punk. They were a lot older. Their lyrics are a lot more, how I would say, there's very scholarly. There are a lot of the true diehard punks in the era that sort of looked at them with a little bit disdain because they were at least 10 years older. Yeah, I just love it. I just love the keyboard flourishes of Dave Greenfield and the Hugh Cornwell type of, his delivery of the song. And worth checking on YouTube. The Stranglers are still they're still going along. They have a different lead singer. I think Perez, and there's a killer YouTube version of this song doing a duet with Jim Kerr, the Simple Minds. So worth checking out. And Simple Minds earlier were a punk band. So there's a little bit of lineage there, but worth checking out for the viewers. It's a killer version of it. But yeah, that's my number 4.
Nice. Good choice. Again, another basic track, but I wanted to cover like all of my scenes and all my bases with this one. Blitzkrieg Bop by the Ramones came out in 1976, was the first track of their self-titled debut album. I mean, like when I first decided to get into punk, like to me, punk when I was a kid was like Green Day, like American Idiot had just come out. Like that's what I thought punk was during that time. And when I heard Billy Armstrong, I can't remember if they did a cover of a Ramones song or if he was just talking about the Ramones in an interview. But he's what led me to the Ramones. I remember hearing that song and just like, it's so accessible. It's like accessible punk music. Like I feel like Sex Pistols can be kind of in your face and intimidating if you're kind of just getting into punk music, or like if you try to get into Black Flag and you've only really listened to Britney Spears, like that's a very hard turn to take in getting into punk. But I feel like they were so great at having that punk rock sound, but structuring it into a pop song and making it a lot more accessible and a bit more mainstream, even though I know a lot of punk fans don't like that term, but it helped really launch punk music to a lot of other people that wouldn't have gotten into it otherwise. So I feel like that song's very important in that.
Yeah, look, you can't go past that. And great minds think alike, because that's my next choice.
Oh, nice.
Off the Road to Ruin, I Want to Be Sedated.
Oh, yeah. I
The
almost picked that one too.
yeah, classic lineup, classic song. And originally it was a B-side. It wasn't the A-side to a single, but it was only for this movie, Times Square, which you may or may not be familiar with, which has got a great soundtrack. The Ramones' I Want to Be Sedated was on this movie soundtrack. And then in 1980, they decided to release it. So originally it came out in 1978. But they released that finally as a single in 1980. But everything I like about the Ramones is encapsulated in that song. It's just a couple of minutes of bliss. It doesn't outstay its welcome. And let's face it, a Ramones concert or a Ramones song never outstays its welcome. There's no gratuitous guitar solos, no drum solos. It's just full on from start to finish. And some of the most joyful live concert experiences have been seeing the Ramones. They're just a joy to behold. And it's everything in that song. And the background to I Want to Be Sedated was that they were in England doing one of their tours, and it was Christmas Day and nothing was open. And basically they were sitting in some dorm, and they were being worked to the ground. Their manager had made them just tour 365 days. And they were just, here we are in a strange country, and it's Christmas, and the lyrics of I Want to Be Sedated came about. So that's the background to that.
Oh, that's funny.
And I think the thing about the Ramones is that there's so much heritage going back to those girl groups. So even their sound is very tapped into the Shangri-Las and that sort of that early type of girl and boy group, rock and roll with a little bit of rockabilly. It's modern, but it's not, and that's what they were tapping into. And that's why they've very much got that pop sensibility. And then you have later acts like Green Day that tapped into it and made it even more accessible.
Yeah.
And let's face it, they've got the most popular T-shirt in the world. If only they just got imagine the cash that would have been clicking over, and it's too late. They're all past. Mm-hmm. So go up to somebody with a Ramones T-shirt and ask top 5 Ramones songs, and I bet you a lot of them just struggle. And I go, what?
Oh my God. Last time I went to a record store, there was like a 5-year-old girl. She must have been like 6, 7, very young. Yeah. And she obviously was excited to go to the record store with her dad, and her dad let her pick out a couple of records. And one of the records she picked out was Rockets to Russia by the Ramones. And then I think the other one was Nevermind by Nirvana. But I just thought that was such a cute little moment and starting them off young,
2 landmark albums. Yeah. No, that's great. Great choices.
And my next one, another sort of basic classic, is Holiday in Cambodia by the Dead Kennedys. That came out in 1980, part of their Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables album. But the Dead Kennedys really helped me through their music, like get into politics and like world issues more. I mean, that the embodiment of that song is talking about, the genocide in Cambodia under Pol Pot. And like, I never was taught that in school or learned about it. Yep. And learning how a quarter of this country's population was completely wiped out. And like, no one in America really knew about it until that Dead Kennedy song. It's just kind of insane to think about. And that just got me more intrigued and want me to learn more about world issues and politics. And Jello Biafra tried to become like the mayor of San Francisco, I think. Yep. After he left Dead Kennedys, I think. And just that song, I really owe him and the band in general, just to give me more awaken to what's going on in the world and what's happening, and just being more aware.
No, that's a great choice. I've seen Jello solo. I haven't seen Dead Kennedys. They were probably before my time. I know the Dead Kennedys have done Australia a few times with, Jello less, no Jellos in the band. And I've heard that they are really good, even with him out of the band. But seeing him live, he's a force of nature, and he's down that Iggy Pop out there. So the Lux interior, just outrageous. So I think when I saw him, he was wearing a surgeon's smock covered in blood, and it was a little bit shock rock, but captivating, and your eyes are on him. Yeah. And he's got a message, and whether you like it or not, you just can't take your eyes off him. He's a captivating performer. But yeah, that's a killer song and wildly influential. All right, going down the British sort of UK punk route is the Buzzcocks. And I think this is an essential album that everybody, if you can get it, get singles going steady. It's just like a greatest hits of all the great punk singles that you can possibly get. And ever fallen in love with someone you shouldn't have? I think it's just a little bit of, I'll say even the word pop, it's punk, but it's got that pop sensibility, and it's just bliss. And whether it's got a little bit of melancholy, I don't know if it's the key changes, and it's got a great lyric. And, Pete Shelley was actually in love with a guy, and it was, I don't know whether it was unrequited or not, but the lyrics are transcendental. Whether it's with, whoever it is, you can sort of relate to those sort of lyrics, and it's a great song, and I think it actually charted really well. And this album, or the album that it came off, which is Love Bites, I don't know if people can see that. That was probably one of the biggest selling punk albums in the UK off that first wave, and off the back of that song. So, yep, that's something I've always liked. And if I was in a band, I'd love to play that song. I think it's a killer. So that's my number two.
They're kind of like the closest like British equivalent to the Ramones. Like, they're just interesting mix to make punk pop very palatable and commercial.
Absolutely. And also Fine Young Cannibals covered the song. I think that charted. I don't know if it charted in the States, but it went top 10 in the UK, and, turned that into a little bit of a hit. So, but yeah.
Another great British punk band for my last one, Oh Bondage Up Yours by the X-Ray Specs, came out in 1977. It was their debut single, and that single actually led to them later getting signed to Virgin Records and releasing their first album. But I just remember, I think I was like 13 or 14, I was watching a documentary on YouTube about, the British punk scene. Of course, they were talking about the usuals like Sex Pistols, The Damned, The Clash, and they did like 3 minutes where they talked about the X-Ray Specs. And I remember one of the footage they showed was Polystyrene performing that song and doing the little beginning intro where she says, some people think little girls should be seen, not heard, but I think, oh, bondage up yours. And like, it was just so changing for me, because I never heard a woman say something like that, like very feminist and like sort of like, fuck you for keeping women down. And it was like a cool moment of like, oh, so I'm not like the only person that feels like certain things are expected of me compared to men. Like this is so cool. And then later getting into the whole 90s rag girl, like Bikini Kill stuff. Like, she was such a pioneer in the whole feminist movement in punk music. And definitely that song is a major part of that history. So
that's a great track. Well done. Look, I think UK punk was it was a movement that was born out of a lot of economic depression. So you're in Thatcherism, Thatcher years. There was a lot of unemployment. There was a lot of the people were just not kind of happy, working class disgruntlement. And I think a lot of the anger came out in punk music, and that's a prime example. So, the Pistols, the Damned, the Clash, a lot of it is very socially and culturally conscious, and a lot of it is social issues of the day. And that is an example. And it's uplifting in the sense, but it's also angry. It's sort of, it's balancing both. And that X-Ray Specs album is killer.
Yeah. but just being able to say that and be like, this is what I think, whether
Yep.
you like hearing it or not, is such a
Yep.
cool thing. And I think, especially in Britain during that time, like you said, that was very against the norm, especially coming from a young
Yep.
Black girl. Like,
Yeah.
she was kind of going against it all. She was the most punk out of everyone, a part of that scene, just for being a woman and being Black. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's a great track. Well, my number one. So I don't know, Sam, if you're like me, there are certain bands that I put in the obsession column
yes.
where you just got to get anything. If you go into a record store and you see a bootleg and was recorded on some crappy cassette player in 1977, you've got to get it. And you know you're going to get, you pay $100 and you put it on the turntable and you know you're going to get dudded because it sounds terrible, but you got to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few of those bands that I'm obsessive, and there's this band I'm just completely obsessive about, and it's The Damned.
Nice.
So iconic first album, Damn, Damn, Damned. And the song that I have chosen is arguably the first punk single, New Rose. I just think it's just direct. It's just to the point, and it's just bliss. And The Damned are such an interesting band because they've gone through so many different stages. They started off as punk, then they went into a psychedelic era, then they went into the gothic era, you know, with Phantasmagoria and, you know, covering songs like Eloise and Off Anything, the love song. And then they've sort of gone, you know, they're still going to this very day and just going through different sort of exploratory type of genres. But I don't think that any of their songs has captured that opening bliss as New Rose. And songs being covered by Guns N' Roses, that was on the Spaghetti Incident, but nowhere near as good as that. And that's my number one. They're one of my favorite bands, and they're my obsession band. I just go to a record store and I know I'm going to get dudded, but I just pick up some stupid bootleg, and sure enough, I get dudded.
But still always worth it.
Do you have this one?
I don't. I actually, the Damned thing I have is a live bootleg from a BBC show they did in like 1982. That was for their fan club.
Yeah.
It actually sounds pretty good, but
yeah, I've got that. If you just see any Damned, just pick it up. They're fantastic. So,
actually,
have you got any honorable mentions? You got any honorable mentions? Just
it was really hard because I really wanted to pick a Misfits single, but there's just so many.
Yep.
And I don't know, because I wanted to touch on like all of the big scenes. So I picked, you know, a couple Londoners, a couple New York, and some of the hardcore stuff. And it was hard for me to leave the Misfits out, but Bullet, I love that song. And plus, like, the cover single art is so great because it's John F. Kennedy essentially getting shot. And just like the art on those singles are just so crazy. Like,
and
I
they would do it yourself. A lot of them, they were for mint because a lot of them had a very small pressing, and they would do it yourself. So people, you know, actually writing it and typing it, the lyrics. Absolutely.
Yeah, just like seeing that art as like a young kid probably just had to be so cool, like back in the day when it was really starting to become a thing. But like The Damned, I almost picked New Rose too. There's just too many to name.
Oh, absolutely.
Forever.
I was going to pick, and it'd just be on the outside, I'm Stranded by The Saints. So that's an Australian band. Again, arguably one of the first punk songs. And that came out of Brisbane in Australia, which was like a small town, politically repressed, very conservative, and similar situation to Britain. They just came up with this absolute 3-minute classic, and just the angst. I'm stranded and I'm on my own. And unfortunately, Chris Bailey recently passed, and he's one of the great, you know, songwriters, singer-songwriters and rock artists of Australia. I also was going to pick off X, the American X, because there's an Australian X, Los Angeles, which is a killer album, and the song Los Angeles. I like that one. And another one called The Dickies, Dawn of the Dickies. And the thing I like is I'm not big on bands that do cover versions, but they do some great cover versions of bands and songs that you wouldn't think, like Nights in White Satin, the old Moody Blues Chestnut, and they just speed it up, and it's just compelling, and it's actually better than the original.
What was the Black Sabbath song they covered?
Paranoid.
Yes, I love their version of
Sped
Paranoid.
Up.
Yeah,
Sped
I love
Up.
that.
Yeah.
They're a great band that don't get enough love.
They don't, and they're sort of one step away from the Ramones, so you can see the lineage there. But I've seen them. I saw them 5 years, and they're still going strong. Same original singer, and it's just. Yeah, it's great. It's just fun punk and very influential. Again, you wouldn't have a lot of those Green Days or Offspring if the Dickies weren't around.
Mm-hmm.
And not forgetting that their most popular song, the Banana Split song. You know that one?
I don't think I do.
Yeah, it was a theme song to a children's TV show. So just check it out. But that's one of their best ones. Well, there you go. 5. I'm exhausted. I mean, I could do 100 because there's so many in that era. But well, thank you very much for that, Sam. And everyone, please subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Please subscribe to Telegram Sam. She's got some fantastic stuff. Have you got anything special coming up on the weekend? You're going to do Record Store Day or anything special?
I'm not really that into Record Store Day, but I actually do plan on going to the record store tomorrow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope everyone else has a good Record Store Day.
Yeah, I know. People actually in Australia, they queue up at midnight. It gets bigger than Ben-Hur. And it's one day. You should support your record stores, but you should be supporting it all the time, not just one day.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, put your comments down, and we'll catch up soon. Take care. All right.
Bye.